Hello beloved, I'm Stephanie and welcome to my Unity Garden Kitchen, where I thought I would show you how to make some of my favorite things. Now I am not great with specific amounts, so I'm gonna link some references and recipes for you that you can check out if you're super detail oriented. But I'm starting with a bowl of about 4 cups of flour. The original recipe calls for all-purpose flour, and I used to make it that way. I've just started making it with half all-purpose flour and half whole wheat flour. I really enjoy that, and I'm gonna try to increase the amount of whole wheat as I go along. So I've got 4 cups of what could be plain white all-purpose flour, but I have 2 cups about of all-purpose and 2 cups of whole wheat. And I'm gonna add just a few simple ingredients. I'm going to knead it for about 10 minutes, put it aside to rise, and in no time at all, we are gonna have fresh bread. So I'm gonna add a little bit of salt, a little bit of olive oil, package of yeast, and warm water. So I'll keep adding water as needed. And I've got my flour handy, so if I need to add more flour, I can amend that way too. I like to start with a spoon before I get my hands in there. So I want to make sure to get all the flour that's on these edges all incorporated into my dough. And if you add too much water, as I said, don't worry. You can always go back and add more flour. So I did get all of this extra flour incorporated, but it is too sticky to knead. So I'm just gonna dip into my flour. And once it's all incorporated, so it's not too dry and it's not sticking to your fingers, so it's not too wet, then we are going to go ahead and start kneading it for about 10 minutes until it changes consistency. It becomes a little bit tougher, harder to knead, a little bit thicker. So I'm gonna look over so I know what time it is. So I have about 10 minutes to knead. And I'm just folding the dough over and pressing it down, folding it over and pressing it down. to leave anything out. So folding and pressing, folding and pressing. And that's about it for the next 10 minutes. I have noticed that there is less kneading involved in using whole wheat bread. So if you're using all-purpose flour, all white all-purpose flour, you may have to knead it a little bit longer. If you're working with half and half, it might take a little bit less time before the bread really forms a nice ball that is keeping its shape and is firm when you press down on it. At that point, you're gonna add a little bit of olive oil to the bowl, coat the bread, so that as it rises, it's totally covered in olive oil and won't stick. You're going to cover it with a cloth and put it aside for an hour and a half to rise. Okay, beloved, while I am waiting for my bread dough to rise, I'm gonna work on some fruit crisp. It's great for breakfast or for dessert, even a snack, and you can use whatever you have on hand as far as fruit is concerned. So I've cut up some seasonal fruit. In this case, I have peaches, and I tossed it with a little bit of lemon juice so it wouldn't brown while I was working. I'm gonna add some cinnamon and some ginger. I like to add a lot of spices when I'm cooking. Not only do I love the flavor, but I love all of the extra health benefits that many of our seasonings and spices provide. So ginger and cinnamon in particular are very good for you. I'm gonna toss them up. I'm gonna add a little bit of maple sugar. That's what I happen to have on hand. I always like to use up what I have, so I'm gonna add a little bit of maple sugar, just a tiny bit in the fruit, because I love that maple flavor. And a tiny bit of vanilla. So I layered the peaches on the bottom of my pan. I also have some fresh blueberries on hand, so I'm gonna put that on top. And now I'm gonna make the topping. So I'm gonna use some oatmeal. Walnuts, because I have them open. Flax seeds. A little bit of whole wheat flour. A little bit more of those spices, so some cinnamon and some ginger, and a little bit more of that maple sugar. I'm gonna mix that up. and then some wet ingredients. So a little bit more vanilla, and then coconut oil. Coconut oil is one of my favorite things. I love to use it in cooking. I love to use it in baking. I love to use it on my skin. So it's a good all-purpose item for me. Now we're gonna layer our crumble topping on top of our fruit. And again, if you didn't have nuts, or you didn't have flax seeds, or you don't like ginger or cinnamon, you can just leave that out. Or use the spices that you like. Now this isn't gonna rise, so you can feel free to put it almost all the way to the top of your pan. And I'm gonna make sure I get every last bit out. And once our fruit is covered with our crumble topping, we are gonna pop it into the oven about an hour until you see the fruit start to bubble up along the sides. I have Clarabelle here helping me, as you can see. I'm not gonna let her help me pop it into the oven though, that's dangerous, so make sure that's for adults only, no puppies, no kids. Okay, I just put the fruit crisp into the oven. The bread dough has only been rising for about 40 minutes, so I'm gonna give it a little bit longer, but I just wanted to show you how beautiful it looks already. You can see that it has already risen quite a bit, so we'll see how it looks in just a little bit longer. It's pretty rainy and dreary today. It's been a pretty cool and wet summer so far. While the tomatoes are not loving that, my cucumbers are doing pretty well. So between my garden and the community garden, I have an abundance of cucumbers, and I want to start preserving as much food as I can. So one of the things that I'm going to work on while my bread dough is rising and my fruit crisp is in the oven is starting some quick refrigerator pickles. So these are gonna be a sweet pickle, kind of a bread and butter pickle. And it's not canned, it's just pickled and refrigerated. So I'm gonna start by putting a pan on the oven with equal parts of vinegar and sugar. So that means that for every cup of vinegar you add, you want to add a cup of sugar. Now how much you make will depend on how many cucumbers you have to pickle or any other vegetable that you're pickling. So it doesn't matter how much you make, but the ratio is going to be 1-to-1 vinegar to sugar. I'm using vegan sugar that I love to get at Aldi, and I'm gonna start that on low on the stove to get that ready for pickling when my cucumbers are ready. While I'm very slowly heating up my vinegar and sugar combination so that the sugar will dissolve into the vinegar, I'm gonna start slicing up a bunch of cucumbers and some onions. Now you can use all kinds of spices for this. You could use coriander, you could add garlic, you could add anything you wanted to flavor it, even some hot peppers. So any flavoring is fine. It's really important to learn about pickling and other preservation methods, especially if you live in the Northeast or another cool climate like me. In 5B, as important as it is to grow your own food, with such a short growing season, if we don't learn to preserve our food, we're going to be behind, because it doesn't matter how much we can grow if we can't store it for when we don't have a growing season. So learning to pickle, ferment, can, all kinds of preservation methods, I don't think we could ever learn too much of. So I'm just gonna start slicing up a bunch of cucumbers and a bunch of onions, because that's what I am going to pickle today. The first time that I made fridge pickles, I used red onions because red onions are my favorite kind of onion, and it turned my pickles pink. They still tasted delicious, so if you have red onions on hand and you don't mind pink pickles, or if you want to do an experiment for fun colored food, red onions did turn my pickles pink. So if you want to make sweet pink pickles, I suggest red onion. Otherwise, you might want to stick with white. Okay, so I have cut up all of my cucumbers and my onions, and I have layered them in the jar. And so all you do is cut up whatever you're pickling, because remember, you can pickle any vegetable or fruit. It doesn't just have to be cucumbers into pickles. And you add whatever seasonings you want. I'm just using onion today. I've melted, or I should say dissolved my sugar into my vinegar. I love the taste of vinegar and sugar. I could just drink this by itself. And what you're gonna do is just slowly start to pour. And you're gonna continue to do this until the jar is filled all the way up. Okay, once you have your entire jar filled, and I'm gonna try to push these guys down a little bit while they're popping up. I'm just gonna cover this with a cloth and set it aside to let the liquid cool before we cover it with a tight jar cover and put it in the fridge for 24 hours. After 24 hours, that's pretty much the minimum that you can pickle something before it has that great flavor infused. But it lasts a long, long time. Remember, pickling isn't just yummy, it's a way to preserve food. So I don't know what the official FDA, CIA, CDC, whoever says about how long pickled foods can last, but I will tell you personally, use your own judgment, do your own research. I personally have eaten food a year after I have pickled it and kept it in the fridge. And again, this is not canned pickles. I'm not doing any canning. It's just a quick, sweet fridge pickle. So I'm just putting it in sugar and vinegar as the preservative and keeping it in the fridge, the second layer of preservation. And I'm personally comfortable eating that food for a very long time. If it doesn't look funny, smell funny, if I don't see signs of mold, if it doesn't have an odd taste, I'm comfortable eating it. You do what's comfortable for you, but I really feel like there is a lot of fear being put out so that people are afraid to grow our own food and preserve our own food, to keep us dependent on a broken system. So the last year and a half now, people have realized how broken our food system is, how our supply chain can break down so easily. So I really think, yes, it's important to use good research and good methods, but all of the big fears about botulism and other scary toxic molds and things that you can get when you preserve food at home, it's not that it's fake news. Those things do exist. I just don't think it's as big of a deal as it's made out to be. I don't think the level of fear should be there. I think there should be caution and respect. So I love to work with bees. I love to work with pit bulls. I love to preserve my own food. And those things take caution and they take respect, but there's no need to fear. So now that I'm off my soapbox, I'm gonna put this aside to cool, and it's been about an hour and a half of rising, so we're gonna head back to check on our bread dough and see how that's doing. Wish I had smell-o-vision to share with you how delicious the fruit crisp smells. It is just delicious, so I can't wait to check on that, but we're gonna check on the bread dough first. So see you soon with some bread dough. Okay, I'm not sure if you can see on the camera, but this has risen so much that it's actually pushing up the top of the napkin. It's over the bowl. That's how much it's risen. So our bread dough has risen. This is looking absolutely beautiful. And what we're going to do now is divide it in half, because the 4 cups of flour make 2 loaves of bread. we're going to just knead it enough to get the air bubbles out and shape it into 2 loaves. So let's do that now. Okay. Now I oiled this up really well with olive oil, so I'm not gonna oil my pan again. You could put some oil on your pan if you were concerned. I am just going to knead this enough to get any air bubbles out and to give it a nice shape. Now I've heard some people say that they like to knead bread dough because it gets their aggressions out, but that is not something that I recommend. I have learned that it's really important to always cook and bake and even garden with a good heart, because your emotions, your feelings will get passed on through this food into whoever you are feeding. So if you want to foster good emotions in people, you want to have a good mind, you want to have a good heart, you want to be thinking positive thoughts while you're working with any kind of food. And that's a Haudenosaunee tradition, a local Haudenosaunee tradition that I was taught at Ganit Jeholege, and it's something that I really think is important to carry through. So I always try to make sure that when I'm working with food, when I'm working with my dough, that I'm not using it to get out negativity or aggression, but instead I'm infusing it with love and joy and peace and blessings and all of those good things. So that is how I think it's important to work with food. And I think the same with gardening, because again, it's all energy, and your energy will go into that plant, and then whoever eats that fruit from that plant will feel whatever you've put in. So I've got my loaves. You can see they're not perfect. This one's a little bit bigger. That's gonna be just fine. And they're shaped pretty well. And now I'm going to cover them again, and we're going to do a second rise. This one is very quick. It's only about 20 minutes. So you're going to put your, whatever you're using, whatever kind of clean cloth you're using. I've got a napkin. You might have a dish towel. You're going to put that over the top on your baking tray, and you're going to let this rise for, again, another only about 20 minutes. And in the time that this is rising, I'm gonna go and check on the fruit crisp in the oven because it smells so good. It might be close to being done. Okay, I pulled the fruit crisp out of the oven. It looks and smells absolutely amazing. I wish that you could smell it, but you can see that it's gotten brown and toasty. Exactly what we wanna see. So this looks great. I'm gonna set this aside to cool. And after 20 minutes or so, our second rise is done on our bread. And you can see maybe that it actually has grown again. So the second rise, there really is a rise. Now, the oven was already preheated because my fruit crisp was in there. So I'm gonna go ahead and pop this into the oven for about 30 minutes, maybe 40 minutes, but I'll check it for sure at 30 minutes and then probably turn the oven down or off, but we'll see. So this is going into the oven next. Okay, welcome back, beloved. My bread is out of the oven after about 30 minutes and it looks and smells amazing. Again, this is 50% white all-purpose flour and 50% whole wheat. You could use 100% all-purpose white flour if that's what you're more comfortable with, and then transition more and more to whole wheat as you get more comfortable. This looks and smells delicious. I'm so excited to try it because although we have not had a good tomato year in 5B, it's just been too cold and wet in my area. Some gorgeous slicer tomatoes coming in, and I can't wait to try some of these. I bought some of my favorite vegan mayonnaise, Vegenaise, and I can't wait to have a fresh tomato sandwich with vegan mayo on that delicious bread that I just pulled out of the oven. I also want to show you how beautiful the fruit crisp looks. Absolutely amazing and delicious. It smells amazing. It's healthy. It's great, again, for everything from a breakfast to a dessert to a snack in between. And I was able to pump out not one, but 2 jars of fridge pickles gallons of fridge pickles. And again, this is just vinegar, sugar, onions, and cucumber, although you can spice it up with any kind of seasonings you like, and you can pickle any fruit or vegetable you want. And you don't have to throw out this brine. What I did with the old brine of the pickles I turned pink is I added some spices and some oil, and I made a salad dressing. So you can use this in salad dressing. You can use the leftover brine over like a pasta salad. You don't have to throw out this vinegar and sugar water that's going to be infused with all your delicious spices. So feel free to reuse that. And then I do want to say, I noticed that everything that I've done in the background here is blue. Like I have a blue tablecloth and a blue napkin that I've been using. And if you know anything about chromotherapy, colors actually affect your appetite. So if you are going to serve food, you actually want to avoid using blue. It decreases the appetite. It makes us less hungry physiologically. So if you want to reduce the amount of food you're eating, using a lot of blue in your kitchen, particularly a blue plate, would be a good way to go. But if you want people to think your food is even more appetizing, you want to use warm colors, specifically red, but also orange and yellow. So red, orange, and yellow, those warm colors, they actually increase your heart rate, they increase your respiration, and they increase your appetite. They are a stimulant, so they make you eat more. Red and green, you often see those in Italian restaurants. So red and green are complementary colors. They're across from each other on the color wheel, and therefore they intensify each other. So red and green are a great color combination if you want to boost your eating or make people feel like your food looks even more appetizing and delicious. So just a little tip. Avoid using too much blue in your kitchen if you are not trying to reduce eating, or if you want people to find your food really appealing, or if you want people to eat more food. Just keep that in mind, because colors actually affect our mood mentally, emotionally, and physiologically. So I also want to point out, I don't have a time clock going, but this whole spread, so the fruit crisp, the 2 loaves of bread, and the 2 gallons of pickles, it's been about 3 hours start to finish, and I have not worked constantly. I've been doing some cleanup in between, I've been doing some Clarabelle loving in between, and of course washing up in between. So keep in mind that we often think that home cooking or food preservation is just too complicated, it just takes too long. This was 3 hours, and of course how long this takes you to eat will depend on how many people you're feeding, but this is going to be quite a bit of food for me for quite a while, especially like the pickles, which will last forever. Well, not forever, but many, many months, and the fruit crisp and the bread. So keep in mind that home cooking, cooking from scratch, which is much more healthy, does not have to be labor intensive. It doesn't have to be an ongoing hours and hours thing. You don't need special skills. You don't need special tools. Work with what you have. Start with one recipe at a time. Granted, I have made all of these dishes before. So of course, the first time you make something, it takes a little longer, but I just want to encourage you, learn to grow food, learn to save seeds, learn to preserve food, learn to share and barter for a lot of things from your local community whenever there's a good or service that is possible to do that with. So I want to thank you so much for joining me in the Unity Garden kitchen and making all of these delicious things with me. Again, I will post some links that will give you some ideas of where I got the inspiration, because I know I'm not exact on times and amounts. That's just how I roll. So thank you so much for rolling with me. I am sending you love, light, peace, blessings, and joy. Please take care of yourself and take care of each other.